generally gives us a little, doesn't she? And what we're going to do next.
Yep. Yep.
We're recording, we're ready to go.
Okay. With the Committee on Technology for special meeting of October 12th, please come to order. Clerk, read the roll.
Adel,
He's
DeBella,
away. Yes.
Drake,
Here.
Gardeau.
I think Peter's.
Commissioner Gardeau, is that you on the WebEx? Gentile,
Here.
Salemi,
Here.
Taylor?
We have a quorum.
We do.
Okay. Public comments relative to agenda items.
Mr. Chairman, this is Judy Allen.
Yes.
Okay,
You're
this is
on.
Judy Allen.
You're on,
Okay.
Judy.
Thank you. This is Judy Allen, West Hartford. First, regarding the discussion about Pura's Innovative Energy Solutions Program, I have read through the Pura docket, and this program is looking for pilot programs that can quickly scale up to provide clean energy to the distribution system. The first round of applications for the program ended the first quarter of 2023. The second round of applications will be in the first quarter of 2024. This doesn't seem to be something the MDC could or should be involved in.
I didn't hear that.
Second,
What was
hello?
it? What was that? She's having. Go ahead. Keep going.
I- Okay. Secondly, regarding CTEC's response to questions, I don't know whether to be offended or honored that my questions were attributed to Scott. By all means, give them my name. I hope their answers to all of your questions and the spirit in which they were given makes it very clear that CTEC is not a company to do business with. And finally, I fail to see the need or purpose for this committee. Unless there is a specific need that has been identified, this exercise seems pointless. You have excellent staff who are and continue to be exceptionally knowledgeable about new technology. I find it interesting that the real need to replace the West Hartford water treatment plant hasn't drawn the same kind of attention. The board seems to have no problem trusting staff in developing the technology for this treatment plan. Perhaps this committee should be called How to Generate Money in the South Meadows. Commissioners have enough to do without taking up more of their time in a purposeless activity. Thank you.
Further comment? Okay. Approval of the minutes of September 21st, 2023.
To approve.
There's a motion to approve. Is there a second? Second?
Second.
Are there any additions or deletions? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Abstain.
I was
Was
going to
not
ask.
there.
I'll ask for that. Opposed? Abstentions? 1. Okay. Kelly?
Item 4 on the agenda, excuse me, this is Kelly Shane, Chief Administrative Officer. Excuse me. Item 4 on the agenda is a follow-up to the last meeting where LCI presented their technology, the dryer technology. And you were going to further discuss if there was any further discussion necessary on that technology as this agenda item with staff.
Okay. There were no questions, were there, from staff?
We haven't received any additional questions from commissioners or from the public. So we're, if there's something that the commissioners would like to talk about, I think we've already talked about that at their presentation.
Well, you're right, I was going to say that. The application was a dryer, and it made a lot of sense relative to the dryer, but again, that wasn't an application to what we
It's a
had.
component of,
Could be a
could be a
component,
component of,
right.
of future, processes, but it's not something it's gonna help us today. But it is a component that we would consider as part of, any new, development we would do, whether it was MSW or whether it was, solid waste. Biosolids.
Yeah, I mean, I think they made a lot of sense with the dryer. He's
Yep.
got it spread out, but that's a front-end issue, isn't it?
Yeah.
Rather than a basic technology. But the drier you can get it, and the more thermal heat that you're going to generate. Is it not true? So that may be an option that people can look at. Okay. The commissioners have no more questions on that. Okay. Then we'll go to discussion of submittal regarding CDM Smith, from staff regarding submittals of CDM Smith. Scott?
Yes, thank you. So you have in front of you a list of 15 questions. This proposal is more generic than some of the others. So, so our questions are more generic. They're really talking about a bunch of different technologies. And so we've basically just asked generic questions about what they had suggested or that they could look into for us. So again, it's really just more generic questions on their submittal.
Let me go into there. I looked at this. Are there any questions? So basically, I thought we were looking at the fluidized bed technology and its application. We had a $2.5 million grant, and there was a $90 million capital cost for a fluidized bed to deal with, at least when we made the application in 2021 to the United States Congress, we talked about PFAS being a significant issue that we're going to deal with. And this was, and also supplement what we're doing now with the multi-hearth incinerators. Is that not the case?
Well, CTEC brought that up in their questions. I'm not sure where they got that information, but we've talked about this in the past when we did apply for the grant, the $2.5 million grant, which was for the cake receiving facility. As part of our master plan that we had done in the past, we had identified all these projects at the plant. And as part of that, one concept would be possibly a fluidized bed and more incineration at the plant. But that 90 million isn't specifically for, it's for a number of improvements at the plant, not just one specific project. So, but the $2.5 million that we received was specifically for the cake receiving facility, which is, if any of you have went on the tour, you saw that, we dumping with dump trucks the cake into the facility. The cake receiving facility would be to enclose that, air emissions, smell, odors, really, and that's what that project's for. So so they did talk about fluidized bed. Obviously, we've talked about that in the past with others. We talked about it in the white paper. There's fluidized bed incineration being built across the country as we speak. So that is a technology that is being deployed as we speak. I think they're building 5 new ones in New Jersey as we speak. So it's kind of like the probably the most proven technology for incineration. Again, the question becomes, are you going to get permitted for it? Really, that's really what it comes down to. Can you get a deep permit, or EPA permit for it.
Let me just address what was written in the letter that I wrote to the United States Congressman in support of this project. And I believe it was the date was in August 3rd, 2021. And it basically discusses an adjunct onto the wastewater needs that we had. It was about the same year. And we put in there that as part of this application, the need, you go down to the need. Unlikely, beyond the acceptance, treatment, and disposal of sludge, sewage sludge, regional assets also have the ability where smaller facilities may not to potentially serve as an environmentally friendly resource to a solution to PFAS contamination in both water and wastewater, solving an increasing concern for many municipalities and businesses. As such, regional assets can serve as a national model for the cost-efficient, effective, and environmentally sound solution to wastewater needs. However, as the need for sludge treatment and disposal increases in the United States, so does the cost, reaching the hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars in some cases. These costs can limit the ability of financially stressed municipalities from making other much-needed capital improvements. In addition, it gets over into the last paragraph and points out expansion would increase the ability to import, store, process, and incinerate biosolids for the region. This project would increase sludge treatment by including 2 new fluidized bed incinerators, and would also provide increased capacity to explore various disposal solutions for PFAS containing sludge in the region.
Yeah, so there's.
Is not, let me finish.
Sure.
Is not PFAS one of the major issues that we're dealing with here? Our concern and how we're going to dispose of it. And it's basically, from what I understand of PFAS at this point in time, at least for sludge, is that the issue becomes thermal. The amount of thermal heat that has to be generated to destroy PFAS. In the West Point study, I believe they're using 1,100 degrees centigrade, which is about 2,200 degrees Fahrenheit. Is that heat going to be generated in the fluid bed incinerator?
Yeah, so if you look at NEBRA, NEBRA is the organization that did the conference up in New Hampshire last year. Janine, who is the head of that group, we have an email from her. It's part of the white paper that we presented. There's a lot of going on. Obviously, there's a lot going on with pilots and testing what can destroy PFAS. We talked about gasification. We talked about incineration, existing incineration technology, which is really fluidized bed and multi-hearth. And one thing that she has said, and they're studying with NEBRA, EPA studying this, is even with their testing fluidized bed incineration, not so much multi-hearth, but fluidized bed incineration, because they're trying to determine, they believe that even existing incinerators can deal with PFAS based on increasing turbulence. So it's not just the temperature, but it's turbulence. So there's a lot going on regarding PFAS. I presented and shared with all of you, there was a study from California that said sodium hydroxide, mixing it with waste at 240 degrees destroys it. There's a lot going on in terms of what can destroy PFAS. So I don't know if we have a real answer to that, Bill.
Well, that's what I think we're looking at.
Exactly.
That's what we're looking at here.
Exactly.
And we're looking at technologies and approaches to that. Also, I think the whole question of electricity is front and center in the state of Connecticut, the cost of electricity. And if you look at the PURA application for the issue of pilot programs, it's decarbonization, the green energy, all the issues that we have to deal with. But the most significant issue is the cost of electricity and the concern whether we're going to have enough electricity as we move into the future, immediate future, of electric cars and a whole bunch of other issues. And there's a real question in whether we have not just electricity, it's renewable energy is a major factor here. And that's one of the major factors that we're confronted with, as well as the disposal of solid waste, which is another issue that is front and center with the legislature. I've been appointed from the city of Hartford to sit on the committee on the South Meadows issue of the garbage facility we have down there and how we're going to deal with closing it up and the environmental issues surrounding it. That's front and center with the General Assembly and what they're doing. We're shipping garbage out of the state of Connecticut. That's the only solution we have. The plant in the South Meadows is closed, it's gone. So there are major issues that we've got to deal with. The whole question of whether the disposal of solid waste, sludge in the facility that we have in the South Meadows is very concerning with the city of Hartford in terms of the discharge, which we're discharging and just meeting the federal standards, which they don't believe is a strong enough and firm enough solution to the problem. So, you know, when we start talking about we don't have any problems, I guess you don't have any problems if you're not close to the plant in the South Meadows. But we have one of the highest incidents of asthma in the state of Connecticut because of this discharge in this area. So there's a whole lot of issues here that this committee and technology has to change. And it's got to change not in 10 years, it's got to change as soon as we can afford it and come up with a solution to it. So, you know, people that are upset with us looking at technology, it isn't an issue that we don't have to do. We do not have the capability to meet the environmental changes that are going to be required. And we're seeing directly what's happening with our environment in terms of flooding, backups, and everything else. It's an overall state authority to decarbonize and go to the green economy, green environment. Go ahead.
Thank you.
Commissioner Salemi.
Yeah, so my own experience with understanding PFAS, what it is, and so forth, actually began with the issue that we had at our Windsor plant after the spill of there was a fire suppression chemical that was used and that I was familiar with. I just don't know anything, just didn't at the time know anything about PFAS. But, you know, the issue there was that this had been, it's a foam that gets used to put out fires with aircraft and aircraft fuel and so forth. But it made it through our plant in the process in Windsor and wound up in the Farmington River is the way that I understood it. And when DEEP went ahead and did testing on the river itself, they found PFAS both below and above the discharge point from our plant in Windsor. And so obviously anything else, there's PFAS entering the Farmington River somewhere else, you know, upstream of that. We started to try to understand what PFAS was, and it's one of these forever chemicals that, you know, takes significant amount of effort to destroy or dismantle or whatever. So that my interest, you know, is in our plant, especially the main plant in Hartford. We know that we have PFAS entering that plant through our sewer system. And, you know, although I don't know that there's any current regulation that says that we have to treat the sewage that comes into the plant and remove PFAS from it, but it certainly seems like the future will hold some sort of requirement for not just us, but everyone who disposes of this waste or has to dispose of it, to find some way to treat PFAS. So certainly my interest in a process that does that, if we're looking 20 years down the road, the way the strategic plan might, should include that. The other issue that I've been interested in and looked at through all these submittals is medical waste. And, I don't know exactly, how medical, I don't know where specific medical waste gets treated in our area, if it just goes through the plant or if there's some separate process that has to be used for it. But before I became an MDC commissioner, which is a very long time ago, I was a member of the Central Connecticut Low-Level Radioactive Waste Committee. And so part of medical waste is the x-rays and all the equipment that's used for x-ray equipment in hospitals and any place that does, imaging for, and there are other ways that low-level radioactive waste gets, created, let's say. And, at the time, there was a search for a location or in a process to dispose of radioactive waste. So that was my interest in medical waste really sort of began then, but continues to try to understand how that is. So, and looking for a process that has, that looks down the road into the future and assumes that, the regulations from both EPA and DEEP here in Connecticut and maybe others regarding the disposal, treatment or disposal of things like PFAS or radioactive waste or medical waste should be part of our plans for the future. And so that's certainly what generated my interest in which of these applicants or respondents to the RFI, I should say, might have a process that can do all those things. So I'm just saying that PFAS is a concern to me, and I would like to think that if we are looking for a new process that's going to include that, and we may be the one opportunity to in the Greater Hartford area to dispose of PFAS. So.
Yeah, again, keep in mind, we aren't requesting an RFP. We're looking at, this is for information. We're pursuing information and looking at information. That's what the technology committee is doing. And then the next step would be to determine whether it makes any sense or not. But we haven't seen a lot, as we've reviewed here, that deals with a lot of the problems we're just talking about. I don't see PFAS as a major issue other than CTEC. And then there's some discussion with, Green, that Green does do pyrolysis and gasification, but they have proprietary technology and did not want to discuss it before the MDC. CTEC came in and did do that, and they provided information. They have patents, things of that nature. Smith, I looked at Smith. Smith really doesn't have a lot of depth in pyrolysis and gasification. They mention it in here, but primarily they do have a strength, without a doubt, in fluid bed incinerators. Incinerators, mass burning, another issue that you're not going to pass off in the state of Connecticut for solid waste. DEEP went through that 4 years or 6 years ago. And mass burning was not a technology that meets our standards going forward or our direction going forward in terms of a green economy or a green environment and decarbonization. So, I mean, I think we want to go in the direction of decarbonization, of electric generation, of renewable energy. Those are things that we right now, we recover 1.7 megawatts of electricity off of our existing system. And, electricity if we can increase the thermal, we increase the electric output, it has a major impact on us. And if you're going to look at electricity, and I think this is something the Board of Finance has got to look at in the next, we've got to go out, I believe, in 2024 for our next electric bid. We go to 3-year bids. In the last 8 years, I guess it was 7 or 8 years, we've gone from 3 cents a kilowatt hours to 6 cents to 9 cents. If you look at the marketplace right now, your retail, residentials and people are paying 24 to 22 cents a kilowatt hour, and we're going out at 9. So I'd like to see from our consultant what he anticipates in the marketplace and where it's going for our bids in 2024. That's a year away, and I'll say to you that most people believe will be somewhere in the area of 16 to 18 cents a kilowatt hour, when the marketplace will probably be 24 to 26. And this isn't renewable energy that we're dealing with. So we could be looking at, we're right now close to $10 million in electricity. If we went from 9 to 18, we'd be at 20 million. So there's some practical thought in terms of strategic planning here and strategic thought into the future when we're looking at technology that was created and we use and we rely on 50 years ago. Let's wake up. And I'm just telling you, that's what we've got to look at. Either we're going to be innovative or we're going to sit here and we're going to see massive increases in our electric rates and our inability to deal with the environment. So that's what I see the technology committee, and maybe there's nothing out there that's acceptable, but we should look at information. Dave?
Yeah.
Commissioner, I'm sorry.
Regarding Smith, I mean, I looked at, actually, in my spreadsheet, I put these guys as probably the most important guys we could be looking at. Assuming in like 6 months, a year, we have some direction where we want to go, and I'm not talking about real details, especially solid waste. If we decide to go solid waste, guys like this, I think, is the first guys you bring in and take us to that level. And I'm not looking to insult engineering here, but I think to go to the next level, which means all the financial, all the pieces that we put together, engineering-wise, put together what you got to do for permitting, all the electric costs, they can wrap all these loose ends into a package. And that's what they do. If we could, we should be looking, as we look at this, we should be looking at what grants are available. If you come up with $2 million to do engineering, a preliminary, these are the next guys we should be bringing in, because that's what they do. I think we do stuff with, right? We use them, right?
They're our biggest.
Right.
Yeah.
No, but but again, we go to the next level, and again, I don't know if MDC Engineering has enough staff to do what it needs to do to get the detail we need, the payback, the finances, all the pieces. So to me, this is really the most important guy in the whole thing, because he can fill in all the pieces that our little group can't, no matter what. Or
If I may, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah.
I just want to clarify, so, the spirit of the technology committee was to look at technology,
Right.
right? It wasn't to look at one specific technology that could destroy PFAS. It was look at a broad brush of technology in general. And I think that's what, they have submitted a bunch of, here's what's out there, and here's what you can look at, and here's the things. But I've already said this before, and I'll say it again. I think Commissioner Drake, you already said this. You got to remember, there are no regulations on PFAS yet. There will be. It's coming, right? It's coming. I've already mentioned that we're doing water testing. We're required across the country to test for PFAS in our water. We're doing that. Thank God, we found 0 PFAS in our drinking water. We've also tested our wastewater. Our wastewater levels of PFAS coming into the plant is below the new standard that was just set by DEEP and EPA. It's below it. It leaves below it. So that's good. But remember, what we're incinerating, whether it's with multi-hearth, whether it's with fluidized bed, whether it's with gasification, is just a solid component of the byproduct of human waste. So 95 to 99% of what we receive through our pipes and through trucks is water that gets discharged to the river with no treatment. There's no way to burn, 45 million gallons a day of water, right? So we're talking about in the context of PFAS and solids, whether it's in MSW or whether it's in human biosolids, you're only talking about less than 5% of the waste that we're distributing to, back into the river. So EPA's got a major challenge on their hands here. One thing I think, and I agree with, I think when the company that was here, LCI, we're hearing in the industry too that, remember, I've said this before, February of 2020, I was at 21, was in Boston EPA's office for a NACWR meeting with our Region 1 members, all New England, and EPA said, we're not going to do anything with PFAS for 5 years. I believe that when this is such a big issue, they're already talking about Maine. We talked about Maine land application. They banned it. They think there's just passed an executive order by the governor of Maine to rescind that because it's just catastrophic for the state of Maine. It's costing them millions and billions of dollars to truck their sludge out of state into Canada or elsewhere in the country. So it is an ongoing, really unknown as to what and how they're going to regulate this. And if there is anything that can deal with this PFAS, not just in the solid, but in the water, effluent, we call it, that gets discharged to the river. Believe, and this is no lie, and think about this, we live in an area where we have a river that we can discharge our waste to. There's parts of the country, including New England, Vermont, they have no river to discharge. They discharge to the ground. So all of their effluent that they discharge, which includes PFAS, is discharged by design, by regulation, into the ground. And they recircharge the ground with effluent. So it's a big, big issue that is not going to get resolved in any time soon. But anyways, I think the spirit of this committee was to look at all technologies. What can we do to improve our way of operation, and what can we do to possibly increase our revenue stream, right?
And the agenda today was talk about Smith.
Right.
So what I'm saying is,
Right.
Smith was at the top of my list to get us to the next step, once we figure out what that step is. That's my opinion. I think they've really quite qualified. PFAS, what was it gonna do? I'm just,
Yeah.
but against what our agenda item is today, so I just.
But there is, just to clarify on the different technologies, there's as much study and pilots going on right now with utilizing existing incineration to destroy PFAS through different air volumes and turbulence that the NEBRA, EPA, NUIAPIC, they're all
Would
studying.
these guys understand that better than our guys? Not to
Um,
okay, I mean, this is kind of what they do.
They got
we
broader
do.
knowledge.
Yeah, I would tell you that these guys are, they're experts in the field, not just in multi-hearth, but in, they're heavily involved in gasification as well. So there's a lot of, almost every engineering firm in the country is looking at all this different technology. It's not just us. So I'm sure they have the staff on hand to look at everything that we're looking at.
Well, that's what, again, I'm gonna say, if we can kind of end up with some direction, could be solid waste.
Yep.
We should be keeping our eyes open for grants that could pay for some
Sure.
engineering up front that get us, here you go, get us to the next level, financial, limits, all the stuff and all the little pieces that go along with it.
I think we're going to talk about that in the last item on the,
Okay, again,
Jen?
that we're talking about Smith, that's why I say that's
yeah,
where
but
they would
Smith,
fit in.
I want to talk about Smith because,
Yeah, we're talking about Smith now, right?
no, but you're talking about grants and things like that.
No, I'm just saying, if Smith gets it
understand
to the
what you're
next
saying
level,
is-
which I answer, we'll talk about.
Let's stay
that.
on Smith. And I agree with you. They do a very broad, if you go through what they're doing.
Again, I read the whole thing. That's
It's
fine.
broad reaching, not much in pyrolysis or gasification, but they do admit
I'm
that
sure they understand it, though.
that's one of the technologies that they do deal with, as a future technology.
Yeah, they're heavily involved in this, this topic, EPA. I know CDM and Brown and Caldwell and all the big engineering firms are working directly with EPA and the states on these work groups. I think CDM is actually on one of the work groups with NACWA and
They
New.
local here, like say Smith, I know Smith is
Yes.
like Boston, Rhode Island.
Smith's-
Yeah, they have a
They have a
local.
group here too.
Yes,
right?
they do.
East Hartford.
Yeah,
And
well,
they
have
also
just like a
have
little
their
spot
big
there,
Boston firm, and they're everywhere. They probably have
yeah. Well, is there anybody
3,000.
big in Hartford area that just does this, just Hartford local? I understand they have a space here, I'm just saying.
Yeah, they're one of the bigger firms. I mean, there's the 3,000. They might have 3,000
We've been
engineers.
dealing with them for 18 or 20
Yeah.
years, and we've been satisfied relative to the
Yes.
service they've provided. No one's questioning their
Yeah.
service and the scope. They're extremely large.
Right.
They deal in significant, I mean, when you read through it, I didn't realize how broad they
Yeah.
were.
And if you look at what's getting permitted, you got to remember, we've got EPA, which oversees the states. It's different in every state. It's uniquely different in every state. But what's getting permitted and built, physically built and operational presently, I'm not saying in the future it's not going to be something like gasification, but right now what's getting built and permitted by EPA and the state environmental agencies is fluidized bed incineration. That's what's happening right today. And that is, whether that's good, bad, or that's the future, I don't know. But right now, in terms of we started this conversation with incineration was we asked, we were begging EPA in February of 2021. We've got a major capacity problem in New England. We don't have enough incineration to handle the quantities. We had New York, the city of New York came in, they sent in Brown and Caldwell, an engineering firm, and they tried to buy existing capacity from us. And we said we don't have it. We don't have any more capacity to give you. So there's probably, Tom, how many requests have we received recently on biosolids for human waste?
Scott, we probably get at least a request a week for either permanent or some kind of temporary support to deal with other incinerators, either planned or unplanned outages.
But listen, we understand that. There's no one that's denying that there isn't a demand
Yeah,
for
there
it
is a
out
demand.
there. In the fluidized bed, the $90 million that we're talking about spending in our capital improvement budget, it talks about fluidized bed. And all I'm saying to you is, I'm not convinced that fluidized bed is what the future is. It's got to be something that has thermal capacity far in existence. When we started talking about this PFAS issue 3 years ago, they came in and talked to us about it, and they believed it was 1,100 degrees Fahrenheit that was the area that you'd be able to destroy. Because it's a chemical, a compound, we can't break that down, but we can destroy it with heat. And they said 1,100 degrees Fahrenheit was what they're talking about. The West Point study said 1,100 degrees Fahrenheit. It's 1,100 degrees centigrade. That's 2,200 degrees Fahrenheit. There's nothing that's burning at that rate that's a multi-hearth incinerator or even a fluidized bed. But also, if you're going to make an investment, let's invest in a technology that's innovative. And I'm not talking about CTEC, I'm talking about pyrolysis and gasification. What gets presented here, whether that's true or false, is the fact that they can generate at 1400 degrees centigrade on a module component, not on a big incinerator, which means you can build onto modules. We got almost 1,000, 100 wastewater treatment facilities in the state of Connecticut. If that technology does work and makes sense and can demonstrate what they're putting on a piece of paper, that would be innovative. It would be revolutionary because you could have smaller wastewater treatment facilities using that thermal, generating more electricity. That solves a major problem for our state in terms of where we're going with electricity capacity. It will take and have a bearing on reducing all electric rates. And it also would provide a technique and a mechanism to deal with PFAS or anything else. So all I'm saying to you is, if you're going to look at it, and that's what we're looking at, is information. We've come across Green, but Green doesn't have anything commercially they're building. They will build certain aspects of pyrolysis, or they'll do it with gasification. So all I'm saying to you is, if you're going to look at something and you can get that thermal, you're talking about hospital waste. Now, hospital waste is an opportunity to grow our base. Medical waste, pharmaceutical waste, and solid waste. At 1400 degrees centigrade, you can destroy hazardous waste. Can't do that in a multi-hearth incinerator. So there's different opportunities and applications. If you want to be innovative, and we want to be innovative as MDC, let's look at things like that. And the bottom line issue is, you got you got Pura that's authorizing and will authorize pilot programs to determine whether it works or not.
So many requests for additional incineration. I know we got other things to do, but why don't we just look at a high-tech fourth incinerator, put it on there, and make some money on it? I don't know. Is that way out there? I don't know.
I think from an informational standpoint, I don't know whether that's true. We're out there looking at what's available.
I understand, but we're trying to find a direction too, besides at the end.
And then maybe that's where you go to a Smith and say, how do you put all this together?
Right.
Does it make sense? How do you apply for a grant from Pura to do a pilot program? They'll give you up to $5 million in that process.
I mean, if we got all these people begging to do incinerator work, find a spot to put a high-tech fourth incinerator. I don't know, maybe that's the.
Well, I mean, we've been talking about this,
Hard, but-
yeah, we've been talking about this forever, right? We know there's a major problem with capacity for the need for incineration. And we know that, right? We've been talking about that well before this technology meeting. So, I think, Tom, what did you say the number was out there? 3,000 tons, or what was the number that you, if you add up what was people requesting us to take?
Well, I mean, it
Sorry,
varies
Tom,
by
could
each
you get to-
request, but
Could you get to the
Could you get
podium?
to
Yeah, can you come up here,
microphone.
Tom, please?
So we can make sure with the staff, can the staff sit up at the
Yeah, you're
at the
welcome.
microphones if we're going to participate? Kelly, why don't you sit up at the microphone?
Chris, you too.
Chris, who else?
Jeff and Mike.
Yeah, Jeff
Yeah.
and Mike, sit up here so we can talk about this.
And,
Why don't you sitting in the bleachers?
right.
Put you in the box seats.
So, Scott, it depends on, who's making the request of us. We've had some that are relatively small. We try and help people out we can just for the environmental benefit and to help other Connecticut utilities out. Like you said, we've had some utilities like New York approach us that would need 10 times the volume of our capacity. So the problem varies from, small utilities need a little capacity, medium-sized ones need a little bit more, big ones need a lot, but they all have the same problem, and that's capacity. So it really varies, but it can be in that thousands of dry ton ranges per year from some of the bigger requests that we've got.
Yeah, but you're not gonna get them, Tom, at least in Hartford, is a environmental justice community. You're not gonna get them with the discharge that you've got, even though it's the federal level. It's not gonna add that much more into their environment. They wanna get down to as low as possible, down to zero. That's what they want for air quality, because East Hartford, Weathersfield, and Hartford suffer the brunt of what comes out of that treatment facility in the South Meadows. You know, in July, August, you get the heavy clouds, everything gets compressed down. It's not a healthy situation to say we're gonna bring more solid waste in here. I mean, we're gonna bring waste, bio waste in here, and we're gonna treat that. Yeah, we could do it, but you're gonna create more of an environmental problem because you're gonna be discharging more into the air. You won't make an air quality.
Yeah, I've never actually seen anything, given the prevailing winds and the height of our stack, because stack height is the most commonly used element for air dispersion. And I've never seen any kind of study that correlates anything directly to our stacks. I'm not saying it may not be out there, but in the nearly 20 years I've been at the district, I've never seen any study that has a direct correlation to our stack cause and effect somewhere else.
Well, you're gonna see them if you talk about going down there and expanding the waste disposal, not solid waste, the sludge disposal in the South Meadows, because you're gonna increase the the discharge, and it's gonna affect air quality. I mean, you've got down there right now, what are we doing, 187 tons of wet sludge to get to 42,000 tons of dry? That's the process you're going through. So if you bring more down, you're gonna have more disbursement into the environment. And we're not at
Unless you get
zero.
better incinerators.
What?
Unless you get higher end incinerators, right?
If you get more heat, if you can, well, the issue was in the pyrolysis and gasification, they resolved the NOx, the DOX, and the particulate matter, the carbon monoxide in that process. It doesn't happen in the multi-hearth incinerator. You got different bags and things on it to consolidate.
You know, I agree with you, but maybe this is where you bring a Smith in right now and say, look, we got a chance to make a lot of money with this incinerator capacity. You know, we have 3. Could we get, is there some 4th device, high end, that we could slap in the front, make a lot of money and solve up? And
Well, you
be
can
hotter,
do
I
it
don't
with
know.
smaller ones if they don't discharge into the air. If you can get the air quality of the discharge down to
maybe
3%.
Smith could figure out how to do it. I don't know. I don't know.
I'm just telling, I'm making that representation.
understand.
I'm not saying it.
I'm just saying,
but
we're looking
the-
at revenue. I'm just
the
saying, you're
logic
sitting there with all this
follows.
revenue sitting out there. We're not doing, sitting there for the taking. I don't know. Seems to me a way we can
Jonah.
take it.
I wanted to echo your thoughts, Commissioner Drake, that what I think Smith brings to the table that's different from the other responses is they're not pitching a solution. They have a breadth of experience in a multitude, like all the various options that we've heard about through the other RFIs, and I think it's particularly valuable to hear someone who's agnostic, vendor neutral, solution neutral. So to me, it's not just that they're based in East Hartford, but I'd like to hear
They're
more.
based in East Hartford. That has no bearing on it.
None at all.
Commissioner Patel.
My opinion, whole process we started was good. In a way, you got a lot of knowledge. All of us who are not knowledgeable learned little bit of new technology. However, in order to proceed, we should have first identified in layman terms what are our objectives and goals. Asking the staff what are the deficiencies we have, what do we want to solve that in a near term, short term, long term, etc. And looking at those information, we should have hired the consultant who can take the lead, investigate everything, research whatever we need to, and then come back with some options. And that could mean that maybe one solving only problem what we have immediately versus maybe solid waste problem, etc. And what and combine both things together, what can help. Rather than simply going around, everybody is making all comments and maybe making comments on scientific areas where we have no knowledge, and maybe exposing ourselves to unnecessary litigations.
Okay.
So
That may
I
be a
suggest,
solution, that may be where we end up. I'm just saying, that could be a
Right.
solution.
I suggest that committee sit together, rewrite the whole specs, what you want to do, and then step by step come up with a program.
I mean, we're out there looking at information. The next step would be, what are we gonna do with it? That's not something we're gonna decide today or in the next week or two. We still have to look at other things that we have coming back. There's a whole bunch of questions out there that have been asked, and they've come back, and we have to evaluate what those are real or not. I think that when you start to talk about what we're doing, we do have a solid waste alternative that was mixed into that issue. And that's not going to be something we're going to be able to determine that we want to build. But it's going to be the state of Connecticut. The legislature is in the process of evaluating solid waste. Let me finish. I'll give it back here. And one of the major problems you have, if you're talking about the South Meadows and solid waste, there will never be a situation, at least that the city of Hartford will ever accept, that has 1 million tons of solid waste going into a facility like we had down there, and having the discharge that it has and the impact on the region. I'm not saying Hartford isn't receptive in their assessment of solid waste, but they're talking about, at least the mayor was, in the last year or two that I've dealt with him, he's saying somewhere in the area of 150 to 200,000 tons a year would be acceptable to the city of Hartford for one reason. It solves a major problem for them. It gets rid of waste, but transportation isn't a major problem. I believe East Hartford and Hartford, I know Hartford does, I think East Hartford does, they go directly with their waste into the plant, okay, because of their contiguous relationship. That means it eliminates a major cost to them, and that's transportation. Because if you go anyplace else, you got to go to a transfer station and then into a wastewater, into a solid waste facility.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, that can be worth $15 to $20 a ton.
That's right.
That one little piece between being able to drive your garbage truck right to Hartford and dump it, and having to drive it to another transfer station, dump it, pick it up, take it, drive it to Hartford and dump it again, $15 to $20.
I'm trying to, you're right. And I'm just trying to make a point here,
Yeah,
because when I looked at what was proposed in MWY, whatever it is, on gasification and pyrolysis, a system that is operational in 4 locations in Europe, they had a situation there where they were at somewhere around $80 a ton. And I think right now, and that did not include, I believe, I can't remember, I read it a while ago, but $70 to $80, and that didn't include transportation. So it was at 90. Right now, we're at about 120, 125. At the end of 5 years, we'll be at 145 by shipping it out. So the state has definitely made a decision that they don't want to do that. One of the things is, if you listen to Deep comes back and says you need a 500,000 ton facility to break even. Now, if this technology can break even at $70 to $80, then it fits into that criteria where we were 10 years ago, and what the state is looking at. And that's what Deep is looking at right now. So, in the legislature.
Smith is coming in next time around.
Yeah, we'll talk with them
Yeah,
about it. Yeah.
can you put on the list, ask them, maybe it's too specific? How do we increase another unit that we can make money on taking more incinerator stuff in? Is, if they have a way of doing it?
It's in their questions.
Okay.
It's in our
I
questions.
didn't
in the
see that,
question,
but
yeah.
okay.
And I saw that
Chairman.
the issue is,
Mr. Chairman?
Commissioner, do you have something? Commissioner Patel? You had your hand
I
up.
would like to.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay, well, I think Commissioner Patel is correct when he says that, we're not really here to decide what's
Right.
scientifically, the science of this stuff, but I think that our role as commissioners, is, and I think it's a good suggestion to have professionals sort of sort out the science for us, so we're not gonna do that here. But our role really is to look down the road, in any kind of strategic plan. And listen, I'm not just talking, I just want you to, everybody, I'm not talking off the top of my head here. I spent 30 years of my career building strategic plans and responding to strategic plans and spending billions of dollars worth of money, both state and private money. So I know what a strategic plan is. And we're basically, we have to look down the road and see, where does the MDC need to be 10 and 20 years from now? And how do we fit into all the other things, the regulations from EPA and DEEP, the industry's ability to deal with these problems, and our historical problems that we've had here. The chairman correctly points out, there's proof that there was problems with asthma, other breathing-related issues throughout the Hartford area that are related to the emissions that we breathe. It may not just be from our plant, but we need to, be conscious of what our role really is, and that's to say, where are we going to be? Are we going to, it's obvious that the regulations keep building. That very rarely do you ever see a regulation take a step backwards and say, no, it's okay, you can do that now, but, the medical waste is a big issue, and it's not getting smaller, it's getting bigger as time goes by. And certainly PFAS, not only on this side, but I think Scott was, I'm glad that we get reminded that, our water, which is surface water that we use, doesn't have PFAS in it. And I mean, we're not just lucky about that. The commissioners, and talking about looking down the road and see where you want to be, it was the original commissioners that decided that we needed, a dam and a reservoir, that stretches all the way to Massachusetts and holds, 30 billion gallons of water.
Land around.
I mean, they didn't necessarily know the technology of how to build a dam to impound that much water, but they knew that Hartford County, at some point in the future, was going to need that much water. And, we still haven't run out. Our safe yield is still way below what can be delivered. So they had very good forward thinking and forward looking, policies. So I think that's what we want to, work with. And I think Commissioner Patel is right when he says that, if the questions, and some of them have become, very detailed about science or whatever, those are not questions that we're going to answer. And maybe we could use the help of an independent sort of consultant that could come in here and help sort these things out. And not only that, but sort out the responsibilities that we're going to have when we in the future. Are we going to have to dispose of PFAS or not? I mean, Scott, you said that maybe that question hasn't been answered yet. That maybe something's going to change with that. But certainly there was a big reaction to when we found it coming out of the Windsor plant. That it was, and then we also found it coming out of the landfill. We get in the effluent from the landfill. So I don't think anybody's happy with those prospects. But I think the biggest one may affect us on the other side of what we do, which is the towns that use wells for their water and individual wells, because PFAS is now in the groundwater, and we don't have to do with that. We may not have to deal with it with our water, but we may have to deal with it another way by supplying water to people that can't use the water that they have. Those are the kind of things that you look down the road at with, and how much technology has to do with what we're going to be in the future. I'd say right now, has a lot to do with it, because so much of the technology is changing. But I just want to, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to support that. And maybe we can come up with a way to do that, Commissioner, and I would be very supportive if we can find a way to do that. So, thank you for that.
So we're comfortable with Smith. Could you go through the questions you have on Smith?
Yeah, I mean, I think we talked, it's really, like I said, there's, you know, they're an engineering firm, the national engineering firm. They have 3,000 and some odd engineers. They work all over the world. So they're heavily involved in, you know, every aspect of engineering, including incineration, including, you know, like I said, there's multiple engineering firms doing white papers on gasification. So there's lots of technical research being done by engineering firms across the country on this specific topic. So I'm sure they mentioned that, you know, that they mentioned that those types of technologies. I'm sure you'll be able to ask them questions about gasification and all different types of technologies. I'm sure they'll be capable of answering your questions. You know, we asked a question about environmental justice. You know, one thing, when we started talking about a capacity, the need for capacity, February of 2021 with EPA, we were talking with DEEP staff regarding the possibility of a fluidized bed, another additional and fluidized bed incineration. And the challenge that we had was DEEP and EPA wanted to go through their this study to determine the capacity need, and where is the capacity need within New England, before they were ever interested in talking about would they possibly permit. And I've said this before, you know, we receive sludge from outside Connecticut. So if we didn't receive sludge from outside Connecticut, we would have plenty of capacity within Connecticut to serve the municipalities within Connecticut. So my concern politically on this topic is, you know, EPA is in Boston. And my concern is that once this capacity analysis is completed, EPA is going to be probably more willing to give a permit for incinerator in Massachusetts than in Connecticut. I don't know that, but that's my own feeling. I believe, why would they give us a permit to build more incineration when they're trucking the sludge into Connecticut? Why don't they just build it in Massachusetts? I met with back about the same time frame, February of 2021. I met with Springfield. I met with Blackstone Valley and Providence CEOs. They were trying as well. They were trying to look to see if they could build a regional incinerator, fluidized bed incinerator in Blackstone Valley, which is just outside of Worcester, Auburn, Massachusetts, wedged in between Auburn and Worcester. And so again, they too, everyone was kind of put on hold because EPA and the states want to look at the need for capacity. So we're all kind of waiting for this decision to be made from DEEP and EPA's on, you know, where is the capacity need. But you know, we'd be more than happy to pursue whatever the committee or the board would like us to pursue. But those are the realities. Those are just the practical realities of what's happening right now in the industry.
One of the problems when you look at a technology committee and you look at innovation in technology, it is going to move so fast, and it's moving so fast right now. You got AI coming at you, and it's going to explode. And you're seeing things that in constructing it. We in Connecticut are 2 years ahead of everybody else in New England and New York in terms of our ability to receive AI, put it into effect, and deliver it to certain locations. The technology's exploded in the last 2 years, and the bottom line issue is it's going to move so fast in every direction. You're going to have driverless cars and trucks in 5 years. The only reason you don't have them right now is you don't have the data capacity that's across the country. It's in certain locations. AI is going to move that enormously quickly because they're bringing all this stuff together. So you're going to see a whole change. Think about what we just went through in the issue of COVID, the COVID issue. COVID, they said, when we finally discovered what it was and how it was affecting us, would take 6 to 7, 8 years to find a vaccine to deal with that issue. Because they were using the vivariums, the basic issue of medical research was you put it into animals first, then you went to an additional chain. They've eliminated every one of the vivariums in New England, in the areas. They don't use it anymore. They use computers to do it. They can put it in a computer and in 15 minutes can do what it took them 5 weeks or 10 weeks of doing a vivarium. That's what took us 10 months instead of 6 to 7 years to come up with the COVID vaccine. That's the way medicine is moving. It's going to move dramatically even faster with the expansion of AI, robotics. Everything's going to change. And unfortunately, if we're not on the cutting edge of innovation in our industry, we're going to be left behind. That's all I'm saying. That's what we got to look at. And the more information we get, the better off we are. And I'm just telling you, one of our major problems in this state is still going to be electricity, at least until you get the expansion of these small module reactors that they'll be putting in place, and then ultimately you'll get fusion, and fusion will solve the problem. And you know, they claim it's 20 years away, probably 5 or 7.
Yeah, Scott or your guys, question 14, the anaerobic digester. What is that specifically, and will that take the load off the incinerator if we do something like that?
No.
And give us the extra electricity capacity? Can that be just slapped on the front of our 3 incinerators?
Yeah, Commissioner, the reason that we put that question there is because there's been discussion amongst the
Good question,
committee
that's
about
what- yeah.
anaerobic digestion.
Right.
And we thought they were in a good position to give that big picture perspective of how you could deploy it and what the benefits would be from it. So that's why we asked that question, is more of an intro to them to, you know, we want you to specifically address that so that all the committee members could
So when
hear
they
that.
come in, I think we want to make sure we talk about our
You
incinerators
discussed that.
and that, yeah, because that maybe that's your extra capacity if it takes the load off. I don't know.
You just, in the current setup, you have to remember, we had this discussion with LCI. No matter what you do from a treatment perspective, up to the door of the incinerator, if you will, the air permit drives how much solids you can put in it. So it doesn't matter how dry the solids are, you're limited by a total dry ton throughput.
But just digest it, doesn't eliminate any solids, just goes through it and still goes to the incinerator?
Well,
Again, I'm
it-
not sure if I understand it, that's
It
why.
eliminates, anaerobic digestion
Right.
will eliminate a portion of the volatile solids. The volatile solids are a portion of the total solids. So it does reduce a portion of the volatile solids.
Well, that's a
But
good
it
question.
wouldn't necessarily let you put more solids into the incinerator because we're limited on the dry ton per hour throughput.
And more importantly, Commissioner, we've said this a lot, is that the reason why everyone in the country is looking for companies like us with incineration right now is because the biosolid, the remaining components of digestion is not incinerated, right? There's quote PFAS in it, and therefore the state of Maine, typically what they do with that byproduct is they spread it over the fields, they bury it.
We're not doing it.
Never mind, we're not doing it. We can't do it in Connecticut. and all the other states have banned it because of the sky is falling with PFAS. So they have no place to bring it. We don't want it because
No BTU.
there's no BTUs in it. So you're burning wet noodles with no
Understood.
BTU value.
What does that guy do with an anaerobic digester at the front of the incinerator?
It's good.
It's just remember this. It's that you've got incineration and you got digestion. They're not one and the same. You don't mix them together. It's one or the other. And some people over the years, EPA and DEEP, they have been trying to get rid of incineration since the 1970s. Everybody went to digestion. So digestion is like processing it halfway and then getting as much BTU as you can out of it through methane gas, and then land applying the remainder, right?
Or landfilling.
So now with PFAS and what happened at the airport in 2018, the logic was, well, if you have incineration, you're, quote, theoretically burning PFAS. Whether that's true or not, I don't know. But one thing's for sure is that when you're digesting it, you're clearly not burning it. You're only digesting it, in a melting pot, so to speak. So they're two different processes. You don't mix them together. You go either one way or the other. And we went one way in the 70s. Others went the other. But the digester technology needs us to burn their waste if they can't land apply or we just don't have the capacity. There's not the capacity across the country to deal with this land application issue that's been created because of PFAS.
Yeah, I mean, think about the issue of what we do now. You know, we're getting thermal energy. That's what's taking the sludge through the sludge. It's heat, and we just don't get enough of it out of the existing incinerators we have. What do we get? 1.7. We recapture 1.7 megawatts. You know, 1.7 megawatts when we've got a demand of about 9 or 10. What, 8?
About 4.
4. Okay, 4. You're spending upward to $9 million for 4. How much you spending?
The Hartford electrical budget is about $3 to $3.5 million, Jeff. It's almost 4, yeah. Yeah.
That's not what I saw the last. Well, you're spending $2 million on natural gas on top of it.
Jeff.
Are you not? That's what it said in.
No, our natural gas.
Bob, we looked at. Oh, Bob's not here. We looked at.
The natural gas is about half of that.
Okay, $1 million. I think it's $1.5 million or $1 million.
About $1 million. Yeah.
Okay. And getting it's a problem too. Natural gas. It's driving up.
We haven't
our
had any
electric
issues.
Haven't had any issue.
bill. Right now, you're not,
Yes.
but you're gonna. No one's building lines because they're gonna do away with it. I'm just saying that's the practical. If you go out into the investment community and says, okay, we're going to do 20-year amortization on expanding these gas lines, and the guy says, well, in 10 years they're not going to be around. What are we going to do then? That's the common thought. Right? Plus, you got New York that won't let you get it past New York. They restrict you coming up through New York. I just sat through a week of this stuff in terms of what the problem is with gas. Yeah, you know, whether they're really going to be able to eliminate gas is another issue. What's going to be the substitute for it? It was supposed to be wind. Wind was going to be one of the major factors. Look at the rate of what the cost of wind is going to be now. It becomes really difficult. And now you've got people walking away from it is the other problem. So it's to be able to create thermal heat is going to be the significant issues as we go down the road. Clean, to make things clean. That's where you're going. That's why when I saw the gasification and pyrolysis and looked at what they can generate in terms of thermal heat, it gives you so many options that you can use and make things cleaner. Especially if they can generate it without the NOx, SOx, particulate matter, carbon monoxide, and everything else. So, you know, if you want to look at where the future is, that's where it's going to be. So, you know, I don't see that coming out of a fluidized bed technology. And that's my own opinion, but I think a lot of people share it, especially every day they're sharing it more and more. We thought that wind was going to be a major solution for us. We've plugged it into our future electric needs. And look at what's happened. Because the wind doesn't blow all the time, just like the sun doesn't shine all the time on solar. So it's got to be more significant technologies like nuclear, but you got other problems with nuclear. Fusion, you don't have that. Anyway, further discussions? So I'm looking forward to next week when Smith comes in, because they've done things all over the country, but it doesn't, when you look at what they've sent to us, doesn't look like they've had a lot of experience in PFAS. You know, look
Well,
at-
I know, but like,
they're talking about incineration.
nobody has any experience at PFAS. I mean, there's nobody that's, there's nobody in the United States that there's no technologies that we're aware of
We're
in the United
seeing
States.
there's no technologies in the United States.
Right, there's no technologies in the United States that is, it can handle PFAS. I don't think EPA even knows what the regulations should be or could be. But, you know, like I said, they've got a broad knowledge, they understand. I think they're pretty fluent in all the technologies, including gasification. So you can ask them all kinds of questions about, you know, that as well, if you'd like.
That's what I'm saying, that's why I'd like to see them come
So,
in. We probably
Commissioner-
should have done them first.
As has been the practice, staff had put together these questions. I think you all have a copy of the questions. If there were more questions to be added, I did write down about the additional incinerator. We'll make sure that we incorporate that.
50.
If you have any other questions you want us to ask CDM Smith, we do provide them with the questions. Typically, it's Thursday. We ask for your additional questions by Monday so that we can provide them to CDM Smith. They would typically have the week and a half to submit the questions back to us so we can, their answers back to us. So we can not only provide them before our meeting with CDM Smith, which is scheduled for Thursday, the 26th, which is 2 weeks from today.
Oh, it's 2 weeks.
2 weeks from today, yes.
What are we doing in the interim? Why is
Nothing.
it 2 weeks?
We've been doing 2 weeks.
Every 2 weeks.
Prep meeting and
Yeah, but the prep meeting is
presentation.
very little, and you got 14 questions.
As of right now, yeah, we have 15 questions.
15 questions, I'm wrong, I
Yep.
was wrong.
Well, I was.
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Patel,
this
are
is
you,
the-
excuse me, Kelly, are you through?
No, I mean, yes, I am through.
You are, okay.
this is the indication of our vagueness in our specs, what we sent out. CDM Smith are basically consultants, which we should be looking at initially to give us the guidance and help. Instead, now because the way your specs were written, they also responded. So they will go to somewhere else who may be in the process of manufacturing such a plant, et cetera,
They can
and
tell us.
proposing these things. So I think even my suggestion is, if they don't get offended, let's not go through this, simply save time and start the process from the scratch. And CDM Smith, who has worked with us for years and years, have the experience, they could end up our consultant. Because if you start looking at them under this process, eventually it can conflict when you want to retain them to advise you.
Sure why there'd be a conflict, I don't know.
Well, I think the frustrating thing was that in the United States, how far behind we are in terms of what other people are doing in Europe. It's scary in terms of innovation. And that's what we're so good at in this country, in every other industry we're in. Innovation and what it's brought to us. Anyway, any further discussion on?
Yeah, I'd like to just bring up an issue to clarify, because this came up in the CTEC questions.
Well, we're gonna get to that.
Well, yeah, but it's about public comments. So I know, Commissioner, you had questions about public comments.
Yeah, I did.
I just
I wanted to ask about it.
Yeah,
when we
exactly.
got-
So-
we got to,
Well, I
section
want to
one.
know how we address the public comments, if Judy might have any, to CDM. So, Commissioner Stone, Chris Stone, are you there?
Scott, before we do any more of this, okay, let's, like I said, I was waiting for the last part of the agenda here.
Yeah, it's on the
Talk about
agenda.
it.
Let's.
Well, I just need to know what we're going to do about CDM Smith's proposal. Are you going to
That
allow?
was my point.
Yeah.
We're gonna
First
allow
of
them
all,
to what?
that, I don't believe that I don't know if our RFI says it, but I can't imagine, I wasn't writing about the argument about,
Yeah.
about CTEC and this, but I was writing about it, the process by which questions from the general public wind up in our questions to, or responded to an RFI without us ever seeing them. And it's not the first time that this has happened where, Robert's Rules of Order, I've been over this with the district clerk on other occasions. If you have something in writing, or you want to make comments, and you have comments in writing, they're submitted to the district clerk, and he records the name of who submitted it, and supposed to write like a brief summary and just give it a subject like you would in an email. But where do we go from that, sending questions from the general public directly to a respondent in an RFI? And, not for any other reason than it obviously created a problem. And I'm not trying to make any judgment on which way anybody should go, but it's a problem big enough where our district council now wants to notify our insurer that there might be a lawsuit over it. We didn't ask those questions, and we never had the opportunity to say whether we wanted to ask them or not. So that's my point. That an email that got sent, and by the way, I got the answer to one of my questions earlier today. An email that was sent from the general public to our district clerk, I guess, at 9 o'clock at night on Friday at 9 o'clock at night with 5 questions. I mean, that went from that email to questions directly for CTEC. I still don't have the document that we sent to CTEC, which would have had, an address. I mean, this is just an attachment. There's no names on it at the top of it or anything. It just starts in the middle of nowhere and then basically gets to, a statement where I guess you sent it to him, John, where you said, these questions were provided by the general public. That's the heading of that section, the last 5 questions. So that's my point. And I would ask that, I don't know if we have a policy that does anything other than Robert's Rules of Order, but we certainly ought to, have a policy when we ask a respondent to come in and tell us about, proprietary stuff for theirs. And I've been part of dozens and dozens of RFIs, and I sat on both, or RFPs too, on both sides of the table as a, respondent, as the person that sent it out. And the big concern there is always about, how much am I going to expose about something that may be proprietary to me, and who's going to get to ask me about that? People are always concerned. I think you know what I'm talking about, Scott. It's commercial espionage. There's always somebody that. Now, I'm not saying that that's what's happened, but I mean, if we don't provide some kind of process that everybody understands and that we can guarantee in some way, then I think we should. And my point is, I don't know how that email with those 5 questions got from an email to our clerk to being part of a document that came from us and went to a respondent. I don't care if it's CTEC or anybody else.
So we have an answer for that question. And we did submit, I think Chris did send this out. Everyone should have it. Chris Stone, you there?
Yes.
Can you explain how, your attachment to the commissioners on how this all came about on the June 29th, 2023 meeting?
We had well, it started with a memorandum from Commissioner Slemmy to the chairman and to me. And the questions that were asked were in large part related to what Commissioner Slemmy had just pointed out. As to the particular questions, in this case to CTEC, and it's set out in red, excuse me, in the district clerk's response to Commissioner Slemmy's memorandum. It was, I believe it was, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Chairman, but as a chairman, it was asked whether questions from the public could be offered and submitted to CTEC, and I believe the response was yes, and I think that was the right response for what it's worth, that if the public had a question or series of questions, that they could ask those questions and submit them to the district clerk, and they'd be included in our list of questions to any respondent, whether it be CTEC or anyone else. And I assume that that's what's prompted this discussion from you, Scott. How do we want to handle that same process, if you want to keep it the same or change it going forward with CDM, and any questions that might be posed by the public to CDM? And regardless of who asked the questions.
You just said that that somebody said that it was okay that you can just send them to the district clerk and then we'll send them directly?
Yes.
Who said that?
Is that what the memo says, John? Can you just pull up the memo? I know each of you have it on by email, but there's a response in the memo. Can you just read that for me? I don't have it in front of me.
This is John Myrtle. At the June 29th meeting, the committee went over the first RFI proposal submittal for REA. The questions were presented to the committee. At the end of the meeting, Judy Allen, during general public comment, asked if the public could submit a question, and Chairman DeBella said, yes, absolutely, send it to John, and it'll be put into the process. So
He didn't say anywhere that we would look at it or we would review it. He just said we can just have the general public send a question directly to a respondent and that they have to answer it?
The meeting was on a Thursday, and we gave commissioners a window until Monday to submit further comments or questions to be included. Judy Allen got up and asked, and the chairman said, sure, put it in. No commissioners had any issues.
The committee. She asked, can she submit to the committee the questions? I said, of course you can.
That's what I thought he said, and that's why I said, you know, that's the Robert's Rules of Order has to get submitted to you, and then the committee gets to look at it. You don't just send it directly.
Well, I don't think there's anything in Robert's Rules of Order about that, but maybe we should have a policy as to how to handle.
There's nothing in Robert's Rules of Order about somebody submitting something in writing to the clerk. There's nothing there about how
It was supposed to be submitted to the committee.
If I may, let's step down to the next paragraph. John, can you read the next paragraph?
Which one? Those starts
on 9-1.
Yeah, 9-1, Judy Allen forwarded questions for CTEC following the same process as with REA. Those questions were added to the list and sent to CTEC and commissioners on September 7th. During the September 7th technology meeting, Scott Jellison asked John Myrtle to read Judy Allen's questions that were included and sent to CTEC. No commissioners questioned the inclusion of her questions.
So my point is, we've in fairness to Commissioner Salemi, we've asked this question. We've been very clear and consistent with how we followed the process. The technology committee has given us direction, and we have followed your direction.
Okay, I'm gonna want the audio recording of that. I'm gonna want that.
It's on OK.
It's available. The audio recording is
And I'd
available.
still say that, you know, look, I don't have any objection to Judy Allen or anyone else coming here and standing in front of us and saying whatever it is their opinion is about what we're doing, everything, to have an we've afforded them that privilege all along, okay? I don't have a problem with that. And then there's another point at which they can get up and do that. But this makes the public part of the process, and they're not. They're not part of the RFI process. And I don't remember ever seeing these questions until I read the response from CTEC to the questions. But I still say, and this has happened before, it's not the only time, I don't want to make it just about this thing. This happened before, where members of the public have come in and basically stood at the microphone, said what they wanted to say, and then you said, well, give me this information, and you sent out a letter, but that included things that they didn't say at the microphone, but it got sent out to all commissioners and wound up being an FOI request at some point. And so, and now we're, now we're winding up, like having to respond to the response. I think that, commissioners from, the questions from commissioners or from staff were all responded to by CTEC. Whether anybody likes them or not, that's up to you when you read the response. But the questions submitted, these 5 questions submitted, generated a response that I don't think anybody's happy with. And I don't remember ever seeing these
We
questions.
never
and
saw them,
saying,
they weren't in
It's okay
detail.
to send
They
them
were
out.
Supposed to be referred to the committee. John got them from her directly and put them into
We
the,
read
There
them.
was no discussion about referring it to the
Yeah,
committee.
we read
The discussion was sending the questions
Yeah.
out. There was a few days to do that, and you had said, go ahead and they can
Yeah.
be part of the process.
Yeah.
Moving forward, because this
Who
is
said
really,
that they could be part of the process. That's
Chairman
what I'm
DeBello.
saying.
no, I
listen.
said we would receive
The-
them and
There's
you
a,
asked
there's a
me that
direct
question.
quote in,
Okay.
in the answer.
Yeah, and I would
Could've been, right?
listen. I would listen to the video, listen to the tape. But I've listened to the tape, so I would listen to the tape. I think it's very clear that we need resolutions from now on. If you ask us to do something, we would like a
We
resolution.
didn't ask you to do it. Somebody else asked if they could do it. That's what I'm
Well,
saying. We didn't
I
ask-
said that we would
Well,
accept the question.
either way,
We should have a
either way,
Excuse me.
I think we should have a process going forward that should be
Right.
approved by the
There's no doubt
committee as
about
to
it.
how to handle questions from the public. And that,
Yep.
it may never solve or resolve the issue in the past, but it'll resolve the issue going forward. We can put something together for the committee. They can consider it
At the next
at
meeting.
their pleasure and modify it, obviously, as they see fit. But a process, I listened to the audio tape. What's represented in the memo that was distributed is, as I see it, accurate. But it really doesn't matter who's right or wrong at this point. We need to move forward constructively, and we'll find an answer. And I think Commissioner Slemmy, to his credit, had suggested this in his
Good
memorandum to
process.
us, Mr. Chairman. So I think that's a good suggestion. We'll take him up on it. We'll prepare a draft and we'll distribute it. And the committee obviously can do with it what they want. But I think generally, and while not specifically in the RFI process, I don't know if the public's mentioned in it or not, but I think you'll all agree, and I know Commissioner Slemmy certainly would probably agree, that public participation for a public entity is critical in the way in the conduct of our business. So how it happens is, I think, more the concern of Commissioner Slemmy. I don't want to speak for him, but how it happens rather than whether it happens is that issue.
Well, the
Well,
assumption
I
in the
would like to have
questions
that
are
answer,
bad
though,
too.
about the RFI. I really would like an answer about that. That, we sent out an RFI that assures that each respondent that they're going to be part of a certain process. And I don't think there was any doubt that they would be asked questions by the technology committee or maybe by the district board. But, I don't know that we, ever assured them that, that they were going to, whether or not they were going to have to answer questions directly from the public, and particularly, you can see from their objection to it, that they weren't, I guess.
Well, there was no
My
objection. There was no
understanding is that
objection.
those questions were asked before. The way they respond, they say these questions were asked before. So I'd like to know if the RFI process, what the RFI process says about
Okay.
that in the
And
response.
just so we're clear, I didn't see an objection to the questions. I think there was some suspicion as to who authored the questions. We now know that it was from Judy Allen, but that's really besides the point. We'll move forward with a recommendation on how to address this going forward and hopefully avoid this in the future.
Can we deal with this at the next committee meeting with policy that we're going to deal with how we're going to handle this?
Well, if I may, we need to decide how we're going to handle any public questions for CDM Smiths. So we've got to get these out, right? So we've already offered public comments through REA, through LCI, through.
We can
how
have
do
a
we?
meeting next week because no one's coming in and we can deal with this issue.
But we have to get the questions out, right? So we've got to get the questions out to CDM.
Comments?
What's that?
Were there any public
I don't know.
comments this
I
meeting?
have no
None.
idea.
If there's none, we don't have to worry about it.
Right.
typically,
Well, we don't know.
public
Well, let's
questions
not-
would
let's have a-
come after this
I understand
meeting.
what
So
I'm sorry?
typically, the public question would come, or questions would come after this meeting when we've had the discussion about this this submission.
Okay.
So the questions would typically come between this Thursday and Monday, which is the typical deadline for additional questions.
So what do
So
you?
if a public person were to ask the questions, it would be this weekend.
Okay. So I guess the question we have for the committee is, what do you want us to do? We followed the same process with REI, we saw the same process with LCI, and the same process with CTEC. What would you like us to do with any questions that we may receive from the public on this proposal?
Well, I'd only say that it would have been nice if you asked me that before the questions got sent out by Judy Hill. Do whatever you did with her. Well, as far as I'm concerned.
I just assumed that the committee would receive them and that the questions would be, I don't know what the questions would be, but the way they were written, I would have had a problem relative to the questions that were submitted.
Well, we read the questions in the meeting, so.
When
read-
did we read?
We
it?
read, on September 7th, we read her questions. I asked John to read her questions because the question was regarding, did we get any public comments? And the answer was yes, we got some from Judy Allen. I said, can you please read them? We read them at the meeting.
You did identify those as Judy Allen's questions?
I just don't remember.
Yeah, but we did, and listen, we'll get everyone a copy of the audio. It's clear, we're not, changing the rules, staff's not changing the rules. You gave us direction, we followed it, right? If you want to give us different direction, give us different direction. But I need to know, what would you like me to do?
I don't think we gave you direction in this, Scott. When did we give you a direction in this?
So for this one,
just said to
I'll
receive.
operate on the assumption that I will not receive public comments, and if that happens, I will send them to CDM on Monday. If I receive any public questions.
I want
I think you
direction,
gotta
I
do it
want
the same way.
direction from the committee,
Why don't we-
please.
For Smith, let's not accept any public comments. How much trouble can we get in?
Yeah, and deal with it.
They'll deal it next week.
You're gonna
I'm
follow
good
a
with-
different
You're worried about
process.
Smith, and I agree with you.
You're gonna follow a different process?
No, I
Yeah.
said, do the same thing with Smith
Right.
that you did with
Chances
this.
are you're not gonna have any.
Well, it doesn't matter. The point is, we're following a process, right? We're following a FARS, Federal Acquisition Rules and Regulations. We're following a process.
Okay, then do the
So we're
same.
not gonna change the process. We're looking for direction from the committee. Tell me what you want me to do.
Don't change the process. Just do
Thank
what
you.
we did.
So if there's any public
Well,
comments,
Okay.
they're gonna be submitted as the chairman directed in June 29th. They're gonna be sent to John Myrtle. Is that correct?
Unless it's profane language.
Unless it's profane language. But they're gonna be directed to John Myrtle, and John Myrtle's gonna include them as part of his submission to the RFI respondent, right? Do we all agree with that?
I think you should treat them the way that Robert's Rules of Order says, that when somebody submits questions, and then the committee should have the ability to decide whether they're going forward or not. I think that you're saying that that's what we did. You're saying that the chairman agreed
But
to
that,
let it go forward, but that's what we should
right, there
do.
was no objection apparently.
There's no objection.
When I did that. But again, I think we've got to have a process that we're gonna receive them and we'll review what's gonna be asked to make sure we don't have this problem.
Again, I think Scott's saying that that's what we did, so we should just keep doing that then.
We read.
Mr. Chairman,
Who's,
Commissioner Curry.
yeah, go, Commissioner Curry, go ahead.
thank you, Mr. Chairman. Very interesting meeting we're having. There's a couple of issues I'm concerned with, and they more deal with Buddy's concerns, but questions from the public, while they may go to John Myrtle, they're really addressed to the board, or in this case, to the committee. So if questions from the public come to the committee, they're not automatically tied to being sent out to a respondent of the respondents of the RFIs. I mean, just common sense. I mean, I'm not a paranoid person, but if we were to proceed as what had recently happened, I'm not comfortable with the questions being asked by the public, that they're questions from the public, but not questions provided to them from someone else. And these questions come to the committee. The committee acts on those questions. The committee can respond to those questions. Or the committee could include in the list of questions for the RFI vendors. But initially, they have to go through the committee. They don't get added to anything. So that's just my opinion.
If I may, I'm just trying to clarify the rules, and I agree with you, Commissioner Curry. But the questions from Judy Allen were read into the record at the September 7th meeting, and there was no objection. Trying to imply, and I'm not saying you are, but I don't like to imply that the MDC staff is not following direction from this committee. So we did exactly what was requested.
I'm not implying that.
Well,
I'm just stating that whatever happened in
give
the
us direction
past,
of what you want us to do. and we'll do it.
Rather than everybody talking.
Those are in the
Oh,
minutes. Those questions read into the minutes.
Let's have some order where we have process when someone says something. We're not interrupting each other and it becomes a conversation of 8 people instead of 1. Go ahead. Commissioner Curry, I believe you had the floor.
no, I'm all set. I mean, whatever happened at the last meeting or didn't happen at the last meeting, that's already happened. But
Yeah.
moving forward, I'm just suggesting that these questions come to the committee for responses, not to the respondents of the RFIs.
So the bottom line issue
Initially.
is, right, the bottom line issue is a change in policy would be, they would be referred to the committee and we would take them up, at the next meeting? It's difficult.
I'm not
to do.
Mr. Chairman, I'm not suggesting there's a change in policy. I'm suggesting that that's what should normally happen, that questions from the public come to the body that's meeting. In this case, it's the Technology Committee. They don't go anywhere else but to the Technology Committee. Technology Committee can review, respond to the questions, answer the questions, refer them on to someone else to answer the questions or not. But when they're addressed to Attorney Myrtle, they're really addressed to the committee, and the committee has to deal with them as they would questions from the general public at a district meeting. That's all.
We would
I'm done.
discuss them at the next committee meeting, if there is going to be questions.
Yeah.
Commissioner
Mr. Chairman,
Slimmy.
you know, the process for that, Robert's Rules of Order, is that a request has to be made by a member of the body to have something read into the record. So that's what I'm going to be looking for in the minutes. The minutes are not published on the website, by the way. You got to get the minutes when we get our agendas for these. They're attachments, but there's no website.
The minutes are on the website.
For the Technology Committee, it's not on the website.
Okay, I'll look.
Is it, or is it? I can't find that.
I believe so. I'll check.
Commissioner Hoffman.
Mr. Chairman, not a member of this committee, but an interested observer. It seems to me, as I recall the discussion at that meeting, the suggestion of Judy Allen's question were presented to this committee. This committee voiced no objection to the comments or questions, however they were phrased. And without objection, the meeting continued. So there was an opportunity to put a check at that moment to make sure that the process was being followed correctly. And it seems to me that it is water over the dam, and the questions were not objected to or questioned beyond what was read. And we moved on. Simple as that.
Again, I believe that the questions were asked after the meeting, submitted to John, and John, were they given to you in the writing that they appeared in the, to the committee?
There's 2 different meetings. The June 29th meeting was first about REA, where Judy raised the prospect of submitting a question. And that's where you said, sure, go
Submit
ahead, send
them
it
to
in.
us.
Yep.
Submit them to the committee, right.
And
No
then so
problem.
No, submit them to John.
No,
this-
it should have been submit them to
But
the
that's
committee.
what was told. They
Oh,
were
okay.
told to submit the questions to John
Okay.
Myrtle.
They should be submitted to the committee. I think Buddy's right. The board, there's got to be a policy on what we're going to do with them.
We're
So-
happy to follow up.
Okay, I'm not saying that. Let's not get into defending everything everybody
No.
did. No one's saying the staff improperly did something. You know, let's not go down that road again. So the bottom line issue is, I believe it should come to the committee, and the committee should determine what we're gonna do with them. Then they go to John, and John did. But you prepared those questions, did you not? Did she give you a written question? They were written?
Her questions were, I didn't prepare the staff questions, that was staff and then procurement.
No, I'm talking about
formatted.
Judy
Yeah, her-
Allen's questions. Did she give you,
She sent me I'm sorry to cut you off. Go ahead.
so she sent you an email?
She sent me an email and her questions were cut and paste into the document that had the staff questions
That's the
and
question I'm
procurement sent
asking.
that to
So
CTEC.
they were hers. All you
Yes,
did was
and you-
put it
Yep.
And everybody has a copy of her email
Okay.
as part of the Commissioner's,
Okay.
District
So
Council Stone.
So commissioners have till Monday to submit any questions they would like to go to CDM. If there are any public questions received by Monday, then we'll have to schedule a meeting next week. Otherwise, if there's no public questions, CDM Smith's questions will go to them and we'll be on schedule for the meeting on the 26th.
That's what I was asking. That works.